Alex sat in their sleek office chair, staring out the window at the bustling city below. The world outside seemed to move in a blur, but inside, Alex's mind lingered on something far more personal. Jake, their younger brother, the one person who had once been a constant source of support, laughter, and shared memories. As children, they had been inseparable partners in crime, adventurers on family vacations, and confidants during the difficult days of school. Through every challenge, they had always leaned on each other, and Alex had been proud to have Jake by their side. But now, years later, the connection that once felt unbreakable had frayed and weakened. What had started as a deep bond of sibling love had morphed into a draining, one-sided relationship. Jake had changed. Where once he had been full of potential, enthusiasm, and the shared dreams of their childhood, he had become a person who constantly sought Alex's help not just emotionally, but financially as well. It started small, with Jake asking for assistance here and there, but over time, the requests became more frequent, more demanding. At first, Alex didn't mind. They had the resources and the belief that families should support one another through tough times. But Jake's reliance on Alex grew to the point where it felt suffocating. His decisions were reckless, impulsive job changes, failed business ventures, and relationships that always ended in disaster. Every time Alex thought their brother had finally turned a corner, he fell back into the same toxic patterns, asking for more help, more attention, more support. What hurt more than anything was Jake's apparent lack of accountability. His endless string of bad decisions never seemed to prompt self-reflection. Instead, Alex became the punching bag for his frustrations. The unspoken expectation was that Alex would clean up the mess, whether it was bailing Jake out of debt, covering his rent, or offering a place to stay after another failed relationship. It wasn't just the financial burden, it was the emotional weight of being dragged down by someone who never seemed to learn or grow. Alex had tried to distance themselves subtly at first, hoping Jake would take the hint and take more responsibility for his life. But each attempt at space had only resulted in more guilt, more manipulation, and more tension. Alex couldn't escape the feeling that they were constantly being pulled into a toxic cycle, unable to break free. Every attempt to confront Jake about the strain on their relationship had ended in guilt trips, arguments, or even passive-aggressive comments that made Alex feel like the bad guy for wanting to live their own life. The realization was growing clearer by the day Jake's presence in Alex's life, once a source of joy, had become a burden. The relationship that had been built on mutual love and understanding now felt like an obligation. As Alex sat in their office, their thoughts swirled with confusion and guilt. They knew something had to change, but they couldn't shake the fear that cutting ties with Jake, even temporarily, might break something that was once so precious. Alex sat alone in their apartment that evening, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on their chest. It had been weeks since the last confrontation with Jake, but the emotional toll lingered like a constant ache. Alex's mind drifted back to the countless moments where they had felt trapped, helpless in the cycle of Jake's manipulative behavior. They had always tried to be patient, tried to be the supportive older sibling, but lately it felt as though every ounce of kindness was being met with selfishness, deceit, or guilt. The first few requests for help had been easy to dismiss, written off as temporary setbacks, or just the natural challenges that come with growing up. But over time, Jake's dependency on Alex had grown, becoming less about family support and more about taking advantage of Alex's success and resources. Alex had watched their brother squander job opportunities, make reckless decisions, and then turn to them for financial assistance. What had once been small loans had grown into larger amounts: rent payments, credit card debts, and car repairs. The more Alex helped, the more it seemed like Jake expected it. But the breaking point had arrived long before the final confrontation. Alex had watched as Jake used their achievements to prop up his own image, claiming credit for things he didn't deserve. He had parroted Alex's career successes to friends, as though the hard work and sacrifices Alex had made were somehow shared between them. He'd even used Alex's reputation to secure connections for his own ventures, only to abandon the people who helped him when things didn't go his way. Every time Alex found themselves walking into a situation where Jake had once again manipulated someone else, whether it was their mutual friends, their parents, or even Alex's colleagues, it felt like a small betrayal. But it wasn't until that one night, when Jake crossed an unthinkable line, that Alex knew things could never go back to how they were. Jake had come to Alex's apartment in the middle of the week, his demeanor unusually tense. He had once again found himself in a mess this time. It was a failed business investment, that had left him in significant debt. Alex, resigned to the familiar pattern, had offered to help, though this time with clear boundaries. They made it clear that they would not be bailing Jake out again without a serious conversation about his behavior and the consequences of his actions. To Alex's disbelief, Jake had responded with an argument that reeked of manipulation, guilt-tripping Alex into feeling responsible for his failures. But it wasn't the argument that shook Alex to the core, it was the moment that followed. In a sudden fit of frustration, Jake had snatched a credit card from Alex's wallet without asking and charged thousands of dollars to cover his debts. The audacity of it all hit Alex like a slap to the face. They had spent years helping Jake, believing in the possibility that he could turn things around. But here, in the span of a single night, Jake had betrayed that trust completely, using Alex's goodwill for his own selfish purposes without a second thought. The reality hit hard. Jake was not the brother Alex had once loved, the one who had shared in childhood memories and promised to always have each other's backs. This was someone who was content to drain Alex dry for his own gain, showing no remorse for the pain or damage he caused. As the anger rose in Alex's chest, so did a cold sense of clarity. They couldn't keep doing this. They couldn't keep pretending that Jake would change, that there was any hope of saving a relationship that was, at its core, built on deception and exploitation. The love they had once shared with Jake had been twisted by manipulation, leaving behind nothing but resentment. No matter how many times Alex had tried to help, to talk things through, Jake had never taken accountability. Each time Alex extended a hand, Jake had yanked it away, either by pushing the boundaries or by simply taking advantage of the goodwill offered. The moment of truth had arrived. That night, as Alex stood in their apartment, staring at the credit card statement in disbelief, the reality was undeniable. Jake would never change. He would never learn the lessons Alex had tried to teach him. Alex had given everything they could, and it was time to stop. It wasn't just the money, or the stolen card, or even the broken promises. It was the constant drain on their emotional well-being, the persistent feeling that their relationship with Jake had become a one-way street. Every time Alex had been there for him, Jake had taken more than they could give, without a thought for the consequences. It was clear now that the bond they once had was gone, irreparably fractured by years of toxic behavior. In that moment, Alex realized that cutting ties with Jake wasn't just an option, it was necessary. They had given him countless chances, and each time, Jake had proven that his priorities were all wrong. There was no more space for guilt, no more space for false hope. The relationship was toxic, and no matter how painful it would be, Alex knew that the only way to move forward was to sever the ties that had once bound them so closely. Alex's heart raced as they picked up the phone, preparing to call Jake and end things once and for all. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the end of an era. The end of the sibling relationship they had once cherished. Alex sat on the edge of their bed, their phone in hand, the screen glowing dimly in the quiet room. The decision had been made, but now came the hardest part, actually carrying it out. Their heart raced, and their stomach twisted in knots as they thought about what was about to happen. This wasn't just another argument. It wasn't a temporary disagreement that could be patched up with a heartfelt apology. This was the end. The final cut. Alex had decided to sever ties with Jake, and the weight of that decision felt heavier than any burden they had ever carried. They had thought about this moment for weeks. Every time Jake had crossed a line, every time he had taken advantage of Alex's kindness, they had told themselves that it was the last straw. But this time, it was different. The betrayal had gone too far. Jake had stolen from them. He had manipulated them, used their goodwill as though it was an entitlement, and with each new transgression, Alex had felt the life drained from the relationship. They had tried for so long to fix things, to help Jake change, but there was no more pretending that things could go back to how they once were. Alex had always been a person who believed in family, in loyalty, in doing what was right. But what did it mean to be loyal to someone who could never be trusted? What did it mean to be family to someone who only saw you as a means to an end? The questions had haunted Alex for days. They knew cutting ties with Jake wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it would be one of the hardest things they would ever do. But they also knew it was the only way to move forward, the only way to stop the toxic cycle that had been eating away at their life for years. Taking a deep breath, Alex tapped the phone screen and dialed Jake's number. The ringing seemed to echo louder than usual, the seconds dragging into minutes. With every beat of the dial tone, Alex's heart pounded harder in their chest. They could feel the emotional weight of this decision settling on their shoulders, pulling them under. What if Jake didn't understand? What if he retaliated? What if, in cutting him off, they lost a piece of themselves they couldn't get back? Finally, Jake answered. Yeah. His voice was flat, uninterested as always. Jake, we need to talk, Alex said, their voice steady but strained. There was a pause, then a sigh. What now? Alex felt a wave of frustration but forced it down. They had already spent too many years letting Jake's lack of concern dictate their interactions. This conversation wasn't going to be like the others. It had to be different. I'm done, Jake. I can't do this anymore. I'm cutting ties with you, Alex said, each word tasting bitter as it left their mouth. It felt like an alien thing to say, as though they were speaking to someone else, but the conviction behind it was undeniable. There was silence on the other end. Then Jake scoffed. You're really going to do this? After everything I've been through? After all I've done for you? I've done everything for you, Jake, Alex replied, their voice breaking slightly. I've been there for you every single time, and this is what I get in return. I can't keep supporting you when you're not willing to help yourself. Another long silence followed, and Alex could feel Jake's anger growing. You think you're better than me now, huh? That you can just throw me away like I'm nothing? Alex swallowed hard, their eyes stinging. No, Jake, I don't think I'm better than you. But I can't keep being your punching bag. I'm done being manipulated, and I'm done with the lies. You're making a huge mistake, Jake spat. You're abandoning family. You'll regret this. Maybe Alex would regret it. Maybe it would be easier to go back, to let things slide and pretend that everything was fine. But deep down, they knew that would be the biggest mistake of all. The regret would eat away at them, just like the years they had already lost trying to make the relationship work. There was nothing left to salvage. I'm not abandoning family, Alex said, their voice low but resolute. I'm choosing to put myself first for once. I'm choosing peace. The line went dead, and Alex sat in the stillness, their hands trembling. The phone felt like a weight in their palm. The finality of the conversation echoed in their mind, and for a brief moment, they wondered if they had made the right choice. But as the minutes passed, a strange sense of relief began to settle in. It was over. Jake was no longer a part of their life, but the relief was quickly replaced by a gnawing emptiness. Alex couldn't help but question their decision. Had they done the right thing? Would they ever be able to fully let go of the guilt of cutting family out of their life? Family was supposed to be the one thing you could rely on, the one thing that should always be there. But what if family was toxic? What if the people who were supposed to love you were the ones causing you the most harm? The guilt didn't disappear. It lingered like an uncomfortable ache in Alex's chest. But then the phone rang again. Alex hesitated for a moment before answering. Alex? Their mother's voice came through the phone, worried. Are you okay? I just heard from Jake. He's really upset. He said you cut him off. Alex sighed. I had to, Mom. I had to. I can't keep letting him take everything from me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Alex's mother didn't speak for a moment, likely processing what Alex had said. Finally, she spoke softly. I understand, but it's not going to be easy, you know. People are going to talk. Alex felt a pang of anxiety, but they steeled themselves. I know, Mom, but this is something I need to do. For me. And in that moment, Alex realized something. This wasn't just about Jake. It was about taking control of their own life, about no longer allowing guilt, obligation, or fear to dictate their choices. It was about breaking free from the toxic hold of a relationship that had long since stopped being healthy. As the conversation ended and Alex hung up, they felt a strange sense of peace settle over them. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt like they were moving forward. The future, though uncertain, seemed a little brighter, a little more open to possibility. And though it hurt, Alex knew that sometimes letting go of the past was the only way to embrace the future. After the difficult decision to cut ties with Jake, Alex found themselves standing at a crossroads, the path ahead uncertain but full of possibility. The weight of years spent in a toxic, draining relationship with their brother had left scars, but it also cleared space for something new. For the first time in a long time, Alex had the freedom to choose what came next without guilt, without obligation, without the looming presence of someone who had always demanded more than they gave. In the days following the split, Alex took a step back from the world, choosing to focus on themselves for the first time in years. The relief of no longer being tethered to Jake's chaos was overwhelming, but so too was the loneliness. There were moments when the quiet felt suffocating, when the absence of someone who had been such a large part of their life was sharp and raw. But these moments were fleeting. The need to heal was more pressing than the desire for comfort, and Alex understood that this break from everything was exactly what they needed. They spent the first few weeks reconnecting with themselves. The daily chaos that had once been dictated by Jake's demands was replaced by a new rhythm, a gentler pace. They woke up earlier, enjoying the quiet mornings to themselves, and began journaling their thoughts. Writing down their feelings, whether anger, sadness, or even relief, helped Alex process the emotional storm that had engulfed them for so long. It was a raw, honest exploration of the hurt and the healing, a way to make sense of everything that had happened. Alex also started exploring hobbies that had been long buried under the weight of their relationship with Jake. They had always loved painting but hadn't touched a brush in years. Now, with time on their hands and no one to disrupt their peace, Alex rediscovered the joy of creating. The canvas became a place of expression, a safe space to pour out the emotions that words couldn't capture. The act of painting was cathartic. Every stroke of color was like a release, a way to reclaim their identity in peace. As weeks turned into months, Alex ventured out into the world again, reconnecting with old friends and building a life that had been sidelined by the years of emotional strain. They met with friends they hadn't seen in years, sharing laughter and stories over coffee. It was refreshing, a reminder of who they were before Jake's constant presence overshadowed everything. Alex's friends were supportive, understanding, and most importantly happy to see them find their footing again. These relationships were grounded in mutual respect, a stark contrast to the manipulative and self-serving dynamics that had characterized Alex's relationship with Jake. Slowly, Alex started to build new, healthier connections. They realized that family didn't have to be blood-related. It was the people who stood by you, who supported your growth, who cared about your well-being. These people became Alex's chosen family, and with them, Alex experienced a sense of belonging that had been missing for years. They spent time with individuals who didn't demand anything from them, but offered love and kindness freely. It was a balm for the soul, healing the wounds that had been left by years of toxic dynamics. Despite the newfound sense of peace, there were still moments of struggle. The loneliness would creep in at unexpected times when they saw other families together, when they heard about shared memories and family gatherings. Alex missed the connection they once had with Jake, or at least the version of it they had once believed in. But in these moments, Alex reminded themselves that what they had lost was not a healthy, supportive relationship. It was the fantasy of what family should have been, not the reality of what it had become. During these moments of solitude, Alex would pause, reflect, and take a deep breath. They had come so far already, and the absence of Jake in their life was no longer a gap. It was a space where they could breathe freely. The freedom they had gained came at a cost, but it was a cost they were willing to pay. They were no longer held back by guilt, no longer burdened by the constant need to fix what was broken. Alex had learned to let go. As time went on, Alex began to focus on their career once more, something that had always been important to them, but had fallen by the wayside in the midst of Jake's constant drama. The absence of Jake's demands allowed Alex to dedicate themselves fully to their professional goals. They immersed themselves in work, taking on new projects, and pushing their boundaries. With every milestone they achieved, Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment. They were no longer just living to please others to manage chaos. They were building something for themselves, creating a future that was grounded in their own ambitions. One of the most significant changes was the clarity that came with distancing themselves from Jake. Alex had been so entwined in their brother's emotional turmoil that they had lost sight of their own goals. Now, with the fog lifted, they could see their future clearly. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. They took on challenges with renewed vigor, knowing that they were capable of so much more than they had ever realized. There were still days when the absence of Jake felt strange, like a missing puzzle piece they couldn't quite place. In those moments, Alex would remind themselves of why they had made this decision. The moments of loneliness weren't signs of weakness, they were proof of strength. They were a sign that Alex had chosen their own peace over the constant turmoil that had once defined their life. They had chosen to let go of the past in order to move forward. Alex also began setting new boundaries, both in personal and professional relationships. They had learned the importance of self-respect, of knowing when to say no and when to protect their energy. They no longer allowed others to drain them or take advantage of their generosity. This newfound strength radiated in all aspects of their life, from friendships to work relationships. Alex felt empowered, in control of their own choices and destiny. And in the quiet moments, when they had time to reflect, Alex found a deep sense of peace. They realized that the decision to cut ties with Jake had been the most difficult, but also the most necessary one they could have made. It had been the turning point in their life, the moment they chose themselves over the toxic patterns of the past. The pain had been real, but it had paved the way for healing. And now, with a clearer sense of self and a renewed focus on their own growth, Alex was ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Alex felt ready to face it. They had rebuilt their life from the ashes of their past, and while the journey was far from over, they knew that they were stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. They were no longer the person they had been in the shadow of Jake's manipulation. They were someone new, someone free. The phone call came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Alex had been sitting in their living room, flipping through an old book, the pages worn from years of use, when the phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed Jake's name. Alex's heart skipped a beat, a mix of dread and curiosity washing over them. It had been months since they'd made the decision to sever ties with their brother, and they hadn't heard from him since. At first, Alex hesitated, unsure of what to do. They stared at the screen, the weight of the moment pressing on their chest. Was Jake calling to apologize? Was he angry? Would he blame Alex for everything that went wrong? The uncertainty lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Alex had worked so hard to move on, to rebuild their life without the constant turmoil Jake had brought. The last thing they wanted was to revisit the pain and frustration that had led them to this point. But curiosity got the best of them. Alex answered the call, steeling themselves for whatever was coming. Alex. Jake's voice came through the line, low and tentative. It wasn't the angry, self-absorbed tone that Alex had come to expect, but rather one that was soaked with something unfamiliar: regret, perhaps, or guilt. Maybe both. Jake, what do you want? Alex's voice was steady, though there was a faint tremor beneath the surface. They had spent so much time pushing Jake out of their life, working to heal, and now here he was, reappearing like a ghost from the past. The emotions bubbled up, but Alex fought to keep them in check. They weren't about to be dragged back into the same toxic dynamic. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, Jake said, his voice almost pleading. I know I screwed up. I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. You were always there for me, and I pushed you away. I need you, Alex. I want to make things right. Alex's chest tightened. The words were familiar. Jake had said similar things in the past, only for them to be followed by more manipulation, more betrayal. This time, however, something felt different. There was a vulnerability in Jake's voice that Alex hadn't heard before, but that vulnerability didn't change the fact that the damage had already been done. Alex had already made the decision to let go, to stop sacrificing their happiness for someone who refused to change. I've heard that before, Alex said, their voice firm now, a quiet strength seeping into their words. You say you want to make things right, but when it comes down to it, it's always the same: me giving, you taking. I can't keep doing this, Jake. The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy, like a thick fog settling over the conversation. Alex could hear Jake's breathing, the tension in the air palpable. Finally, he spoke again, this time with a different tone, more defensive, more accusatory. You're just going to walk away like that? After everything? You think I've never been through anything? You think I don't need my family? His words were sharp, tinged with anger and hurt. It was the same old pattern. The guilt trip, the blame shifting. Jake had always known how to turn the tables and make Alex feel responsible for his failures. Alex could feel their resolve starting to waver, but they quickly reminded themselves of everything they had endured over the years. The constant manipulation, the way Jake had used them as a crutch without ever truly supporting them in return. The way their relationship had become nothing more than a cycle of resentment and disappointment. The toll it had taken on their mental health and happiness. No, Jake, Alex said, their voice unwavering now. I'm not walking away. I'm moving forward, and I can't keep carrying you with me. I've given you chance after chance, but you've never changed. I've put my life on hold for you, and I can't do that anymore. I need to live for myself. Jake's voice cracked, a mixture of frustration and desperation creeping in. You think I wanted to be like this? You think I want to be a burden on you? You think I don't feel the weight of it? But you're my brother, Alex. You're supposed to be there for me. Alex felt the familiar tug of guilt, the ache of love for the person they once shared everything with. It was hard, harder than anything they'd ever done. But they knew, deep down, that this was the right choice. They had to choose themselves, choose peace, choose their own happiness, no matter how painful it was. I've always been there for you, Jake. But you've never been there for me, Alex replied, the words coming from a place of deep sorrow and acceptance. I can't keep living in the past, hoping that things will be different. You have to find your own way now. And so do I. There was a long pause before Jake spoke again, his voice almost a whisper. I don't know what to do anymore. Maybe it's time for both of us to figure that out, Alex said quietly, the weight of the moment settling in. Goodbye, Jake. With that, Alex ended the call, their finger hovering over the screen for a moment longer than necessary. The finality of it hit them like a wave, cold, overwhelming, but also strangely freeing. It was done. There was no going back. Alex sat down on the couch, their heart racing, but also strangely calm. They had faced their past, confronted the emotional pull of guilt, and come out the other side stronger. It wasn't easy, and there was still a part of them that ached for the sibling they once had. But they knew that this was the right choice. The cycle was broken. In that moment, Alex realized something profound. It wasn't about cutting Jake out of their life, it was about taking back control over their own. The decision to let go was not a rejection of family, but an affirmation of self-worth. Alex had learned that sometimes love meant letting go, even when it was the hardest thing to do. As they sat there in the quiet aftermath, Alex felt a sense of peace settle over them. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they felt ready to walk it. Alone, perhaps, but not lonely. They had chosen themselves, and that was enough. Focus on Alex's growth and future, showing the positive outcomes of their decision. In the months following the decision to cut ties with Jake, Alex begins to experience a transformation. The emotional weight that once tied them to a toxic relationship is now gone, and with it, a newfound sense of freedom. Alex's confidence skyrockets as they embrace life without the constant emotional turmoil Jake had brought into their world. They walk with their head held high, making decisions that are solely for their own well-being. Every step taken now feels purposeful, no longer influenced by guilt or familiar obligation. With the mental space that came from severing ties with Jake, Alex focuses their energy on their career. They take on new projects, gain promotions, and, most importantly, find fulfillment in their work. They realize they had been holding themselves back by putting their brother's needs first for so long. Now, they are able to fully invest in their own dreams and ambitions. Alex is no longer bogged down by the constant requests for money or emotional support that Jake once demanded. Their productivity and drive become stronger than ever. Alex's career trajectory begins to soar, and they feel a sense of accomplishment that had eluded them for years. One of the most surprising developments is the deepening of Alex's relationships with other people. Free from the toxic pull of their relationship with Jake, Alex now has the emotional bandwidth to invest in friendships and relationships that are based on mutual respect and support. They reconnect with old friends, make new ones, and find a community where love and loyalty are given and received equally. These relationships allow Alex to experience real, fulfilling connections that were impossible with Jake in their life. As Alex's career continues to grow, they also begin to explore new life experiences. They take up hobbies they had abandoned years ago, go on trips to places they always dreamed of visiting, and finally begin living for themselves. Travel becomes an avenue for personal growth and healing. For the first time in a long while, Alex feels like they have the space to enjoy life without the constant pull of negativity from their past. These experiences open their eyes to new perspectives and allow them to experience the world with a sense of joy they hadn't felt in years. Alex's emotional growth is evident. They learn the importance of setting clear boundaries and the necessity of protecting their mental and emotional health through therapy or self-reflection. Alex uncovers just how much they had been sacrificing their own happiness for a relationship that no longer served them. They become adept at recognizing unhealthy patterns in their relationships and make a conscious effort to avoid them. Alex's ability to protect themselves emotionally helps them maintain peace and joy in their life. They understand now that in order to love others, they first needed to learn to love and protect themselves. A key moment in Alex's journey comes when they reflect on their decision to cut ties with Jake. They realize that this choice wasn't just about cutting out a toxic person, it was an act of reclaiming their life. For years, they felt trapped by the expectations and manipulations Jake placed on them, but now they see how freeing the decision was. In choosing to let go of Jake, Alex chose themselves. They recognize the importance of setting boundaries and the role these boundaries played in allowing them to heal and grow. This newfound self-respect and empowerment fuel their continuing growth and progress in all areas of their life. In the final moments of this chapter, Alex experiences the quiet joy of peace. They embrace the fact that life is better without the emotional chaos Jake brought with him. Alex finds joy in the small victories, whether it's waking up each day feeling at ease or achieving personal milestones in their career. They have learned to appreciate the simplicity of happiness without strings attached. The absence of Jake no longer feels strange or empty, it feels like freedom. Alex is no longer shackled by the emotional baggage of their past. They are ready to face the future with strength, clarity, and an unwavering sense of self. This final chapter highlights the transformation Alex undergoes, from a place of emotional entrapment to one of empowerment. They have learned to prioritize their own happiness, built a life that aligns with their values, and embraced the joy that comes from living authentically. Alex is now ready for the future, free from the toxic relationship that once held them back. As Alex stands on the edge of a new chapter, they can't help but reflect on the long journey that brought them here. The road from the pain of losing a brother to the peace they now feel was not easy, but it was necessary. Looking back, Alex remembers the weight of the toxic relationship, with Jake the constant manipulation, the emotional exhaustion, and the feelings of guilt and obligation that held them in a perpetual state of tension. For so long, they had believed that family meant enduring everything, no matter how damaging it was. But in choosing to cut ties with Jake, Alex made a radical shift. They chose peace over obligation, self-love over guilt, and healing over constant heart-harsh. It wasn't an easy decision, but in hindsight, it was the right one. The emotional burden they once carried feels like a distant memory now. No longer burdened by Jake's demands, Alex has been able to build a life that is truly their own. Since cutting ties with their brother, Alex has found fulfillment in ways they never expected. Their career has flourished, friendships have deepened, and new experiences have opened doors they once thought were closed. But more than anything, Alex has learned the true meaning of independence. They've come to understand that while family is important, their happiness and emotional well-being cannot be dependent on anyone else's actions or approval. The relationships Alex has cultivated since severing ties with Jake have been built on trust, respect, and mutual support. For the first time in years, Alex feels surrounded by people who lift them up instead of dragging them down. These friendships have become a new kind of family, one that is not bound by blood, but by love and shared experiences. The sense of inner peace Alex now enjoys is profound. There are no more sleepless nights filled with worry or self-doubt. No more guilt over cutting someone out of their life who wasn't able to reciprocate the love and support they gave. Instead, there is a quiet, contented knowing that they made the right choice for their own mental and emotional health. It's not that Alex doesn't miss the brother they once had. It's that they have learned to live without the toxic pull that Jake's presence had in their life. As they stand firm in their decision, Alex feels ready to face whatever the future holds. They are no longer afraid of what's to come, knowing that they have the strength to navigate any challenge. The future is theirs to shape, free from the burden of guilt, regret, or toxic relationships. They have learned that true peace comes from within, and in embracing their own worth and setting boundaries, Alex has given themselves the greatest gift of all, a life full of peace, self-love, and the freedom to live authentically.